Shalom, everyone. This is the first session of our discussion of the Mishnah in depth. We are going to start with the Masechet Berakhot, but before we go into the text, the first thing we're going to do, and that is necessary for every study of Mishnah, of Gemara, of Midrash, it's the comprehensive view of the text, not looking only at one Mishnah, but rather looking at the whole text. So if you look at Masechet Berakhot has 9 chapters, and they're divided in the following manner: Perek Aleph, Perek Bet, and Perek Gimel. The first, second, and third chapter are dedicated to Kriyat Shema, and the last of those 3 chapters, chapter Gimel, chapter 3, segues somewhat into Tefillah, but the main topic of these 3 chapters is Kriyat Shema, and that's important because the Mishnah plunges right into Kriyat Shema without giving us any introduction about Tefillah, and that has to be seen in light of our discussion of the editing of the Mishnayot and putting together files that were pre-existing, maybe from different Batei Midrash or different compilations. Then chapter 4 and chapter 5 speaks about Tefillah, specifically the Amidah. Chapter 6 and chapter 7 speak about the Berakhot Hamazon and the Zimun, and also the blessings for fruits, etc. The 8th chapter, Perek Het, speaks about the differences between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel Baseuda, as Elu Devarim Sheben Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel Baseuda. What are the disagreements between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel? But most of them do not apply to a regular meal, but to the meals of Shabbat. So it seems like the main topic is really the dispute between Hillel and Shammai, and it is just in a secondary way related to the Berakhot. And Perek Teshri, the 9th chapter, speaks about the special blessings for miracles, for special sites, and it ends with some sort of Agadah. Agadata, as we have mentioned before, that Agadata is the moral message, is usually the marker for the end of a file in the Mishnah. So to recap, we have 3 chapters speaking about Kriyat Shema, 2 chapters speaking about Tefillah, 2 chapters speaking about Berakhot Hamazon and general blessings, 1 chapter talking about the debate between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, and finally, Haim Ovadia, the general blessings for all kind of different events. So now we'll go through the Mishnah and look at what it can tell us of the seat in life. Also, not only the debate in the Mishnah, but also in the seat of life, the social context of the Mishnah, etc. These are the things that we're going to look at. So the first Mishnah starts in the first chapter. Me'ematai, from when may one recite Shema in the evening? From the time when the Kohanim go into either Terumah until the end of the first watch. We assume that the night is divided into 3 watch, 4 hours each. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the sages say until midnight. Rabban Gamliel says until the break of dawn. So if we stop here, what we see is that the beginning, the time for the beginning Kriyat Shema is not a set time; it's a flexible time. From the time the Kohanim enter into the temple to eat Truma, where they are purified from their Tum'ah. In the Talmud, in the Gemara, the Gemara asks, of course, what is the time, and they say from the time people eat or the poor people eat. But none of these markers is a rigid one, sort of a sunset, or 10 minutes after sunset, or 18 minutes before the stars are out, and that might reflect the original halacha, which was more individual and particular, not with set times, not a uniform halacha that gives us global general guidelines that fit everywhere, but rather specific, more particular ones for people wherever they are. So people who lived in Yerushalayim knew Mishasha Kohanim Nichasim Lechol B'Terumatam. They know when the Kohanim eat teruma, or in any other part of the land they are allowed to eat teruma after they are purified at the end of the day. So this is an important thing to have in mind, that this is an example of the more flexible timelines in the Mishnah. And what is the end of that? What the boundary of reading the Shema? According to Rabbi Eliezer, it's the first watch. According to Hachamim, it's until midnight. Rabban Gamliel says Ad she'aleh amud hashachar, until the break of dawn. One time his son came from Bet HaMishteh. Amru lo lo karinu Shema. They came back from a wedding and they said, we didn't read Kriyat Shema. Now what does it mean? Did they pray? Did they say Tfilat Arvit with the Shema or not? Apparently they didn't, because if that would have been the problem, they would say we prayed Arvit, and with Arvit we said Shema as well. So at that point in time, at the time of Rabbi Eliezer, it seems like the Tfilah is not yet established in a way that everyone prays Arvit. Maybe yes Shacharit, but not Arvit. Amar lehem im lo al amud hashachar havim aten likrot velo zo bilvad. So he tells them you must read if if it's not the break of dawn yet. Interesting to note here also, his sons must be older, they're not kids, because they come late at night from Bet HaMishteh. So we have the sons of the rabbi in a party, in a wedding, apparently coming late at night, coming after midnight, and they don't know that he rules as is written in the Mishnah. If they would have known the Mishnah by heart, if it's pre-existing as an oral law, they should have known that that's how he rules. But they just say, we miss Shema, and he says you have to read. Velozo bilvad. Not only this, but everything, whatever Hachamim said that the one could do until midnight, one can actually do Ad she'aleh amud hashachar. One can do until the break of dawn, and that is certain things with the sacrifices, what one can or cannot eat. So why did the rabbi say that you have to finish at midnight? That is the deadline, in order to prevent people from doing a sin. So already in the first Mishnah of Berakhot, we find the concept of a fence, and that is limiting the time in which one is allowed to say Kriyat Shema. But Rabban Gamliel says to his sons, even though the official rule is Ad Hatzot, until midnight, you could keep on reading after midnight. So we don't know that this is a halachic debate between them, that Rabban Gamliel wants this to be known to all, but rather he says you still have an option. Okay, Mishnah Bet. The second Mishnah is Me'matai korin Shema b'shacharit. When do you read Shema in the morning? Mishiyakir ben tchelet lelavan. From the time you could recognize distinguish the difference between blue and white fabric. So we assume that it's the fabric of the talit. Rabbi Eliezer omer ben tchelet lecharti. Between that, you have to be able to distinguish between the blue color and a blue greenish color. V'gomra ada netzach hama, and you have to finish it by sunrise. Here again we see the timelines or the deadlines are not rigid. The ability to recognize the difference of colors between blue and white or blue and green differs from one person to another, from one place to another. We're talking about times where people did not have means to accurately measure time, and this is what we have here. Again, a sort of flexible timeline or boundary. Fine. Then another point to highlight here. בית שמאי אומרים בערב כל אדם יטוב ויקראו בבוקר יעמדו, שנאמר ובשוכבך ובקומך, ובתל אומרים כל אדם קורא כדרכו, שנאמר ובלכתך בדרך. אם כן, למה נאמר ובשוכבך ובקומך, בשעה שבני אדם שוכבים ובשעה שבני אדם עומדים? The school of Shammai says, in the evening all people should recline and recite Shema, and in the morning they should be standing, since it says read those words when you lie down and when you arise. But the school of Hillel says each person may recite it in his usual posture. So it says when you walk on the road. So how do you say it? Walking, sleeping, standing up? No. Bet Hillel say Lama ne'emar ufshor b'chav kumecha. When the verse says when you lie down, when you arise, it refers to the general time in which people stand up or go to sleep. This is an example of Bet Shammai adhering to the more literal sense of the text, and Bet Hillel applying a sort of a midrash halacha that fits with the picture that we've seen in the discussion in Masechet Pesachim, in the debate that Hillel had with Bnei Betera when they were not sure whether one can bring Korban Pesach on Shabbat, and he, according to the Bavli, he used Midrash Halacha and they listened to him, but according to the Yerushalmi, all the Midrash Halacha, all the methods that he used, Kal Vachomer, Gezerah Shava, Binyan Av, all the different midrashic tools that he used to interpret the Pasuk were rejected by Bnei Betera until he was able to cite a Shemuah. He says, Kach Shamati, Mishmaya V'Avtalion, this is what I've received from my rabbis. Here, this is a sort of a case of Midrash Halacha, because Bet Shammai, look at the Pasuk, it says, B'shoch becha uvkumecha, they take it literally. You lie down, you get up. But Hillel use logical process. It says, the Pasuk also says, Belechtecha badech, when you walk, so it must exclude sleeping, lying down, or standing. Therefore, I will interpret the word B'shoch becha uvkumecha, a legal interpretation, at the time that you people usually go to sleep or stand up. Rabbi Tarfon adds, I was traveling and I lied down in order to read following the ruling of Bet Shammai, and I put myself in danger. And they told him, people responded to him, you deserve that. You deserved being in danger because you went against the view of Bet Hillel. So Rabbi Tarfon follows Halacha of Bet Shammai. So we don't yet have the rule that Bet Hillel determined the law, and we always follow their decision. But we also see here the special characteristic of the Mishnah that we mentioned before, and that is the recording of a live conversation in the Bet Midrash. Because Rabbi Tarfon is talking and people answer him in the Bet Midrash, and this is recorded in the Mishnah. Bashahar, Mishnah 4. Bashahar mevarech shtayim lefaneh ve'achat la'achareh, ובערב שתיים לפניה ושתיים לאחריה, אחת ארוכה ואחת קצרה. מקום שאמרו להאריך אינו רשאי לקצר. לקצר אינו רשאי להאריך. לחתום אינו רשאי שלא לחתום. ושלא לחתום אינו רשאי לחתום. So, this Mishnah speaks about the Berakhot leading to Kriyat Shema, not talking yet about the Amidah at all. In the morning, one says 2 blessings before the Shema and 1 after it, while in the evening, one says 2 blessings before it and 1 blessing after it. If it was said that the blessing should be long, he cannot shorten it. But when they said to make it short, he cannot lengthen it. Where they said to conclude it, he cannot omit the conclusion, and where they said not to conclude, he's not permitted to conclude. So we are still talking here about a liquid time of the tefillah. It's not clear to people what exactly is the text of the tefillah. So they still argue whether you say Baruch Atah Hashem at the end, or you don't say it. Now, the question is, what is really the meaning of the word makom? Makom she'amru le'arich. Does it mean that this is speaking about a halachic place or a physical place? Is it where people usually say a long bracha, or where the rabbis rule that you say a bracha? And it seems like from the word makom she'amru, it's that it depends on the decision of the rabbis. And this is the formative stage of the Berakhot, and it's still recorded in the Mishnah. There's no final, the only final verdict the Mishnah gives us is that if you know in the Kriyat Shema that you read where a full bracha is required and where not, you cannot change it. But not everybody knew it yet. Finally, the last Mishnah of chapter of chapter 1 gives us indeed the seam line that we've been speaking about before, that whenever we find an Agadah, Midrash, non-halachic part in the Mishnah, it tells us that this was an original file that was separate from the rest of the Mishnah, and this is an indicator that the at least chapter 1 of Masechet Berakhot used to be a self-standing unit, because it ends with a midrash on Kriyat Shema, Maskirin Yetziat Mitzrayim Balelot, and it might have been added in a later period, because the first Mishnah of the chapter is Me'ematai Korin et Shema Be'arvit. It is said as a clear, obvious law that you read the Kriyat Shema. So the last Mishnah maybe refers to the Shema with the third reading, which is Parashat Tzitzit, where Yetziat Mitzrayim is mentioned. So all this whole discussion of Kriyat Shema, we didn't yet know whether it refers to Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elohecha, Vayayim Shamoa, or to Vayomer and Tzitzit as well. Here we speak about Vayomer, and it said, one must mention the exodus from Egypt at night. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Harei ani keven 70 shana, I'm almost 70 years old. Velo zachiti shete'amer Yetziat Mitzrayim balelot ad shederashah ben zoma. I never had the merit to hear Yetziat Mitzrayim recited at night until Ben Zoma interpreted it. Shene'emar leman tizkor et yom tzedecha. You have to do those things in order to remember the day you have left Egypt, all the day of your life. Yemei hayecha hayamim, kol yemei hayecha halilot. This is another example of Midrash Halacha incorporated into the Mishnah. Yemei hayecha, the Torah says, kol yemei hayecha, all the days of your life. Rabbi Ishmael would have said, following his methodology in the interpretation of the Psukim, that this is a place where the Dibra Torah, Kilshon Bnei Adam, because the Torah cannot say this verse without the word kol. What do we want the Torah to say? Leman tizkor et yom tzetecha me'eretz Mitzrayim yemei hayecha. You cannot say it in Hebrew. You have to say leman tizkor kol yemei hayecha, all the days of your life. But the rabbis interpret here the word kol as a superfluous word, and therefore a word that you could derive halachot from. So yemei hayecha hayamim, kol yemei hayecha halilot. Yemei hayecha refers to the days. Kol is inclusive. It comes to include nights as well. The rabbis say yemei hayecha refers to this world. Kol yemei hayecha lehavi limot HaMashiach, all the days of your life to Mot HaMashiach. Now that is hard to take at face value as a literal discussion, because if the rabbis ruled that Yetziat Mitzrayim is not mentioned at night, as they say, it's this world and the world to come, that you will remember the world to come in Yemot HaMashiach as well, then according to the rule that we follow majority, we should not be reciting Kriyat Shema at night. So in later generations, in order to interpret that, they shifted the weight of the dispute to the question of Yemot HaMashiach. The only question was, that's the interpretation that the sages were saying, that when Mashiach comes, we are still going to mention the Exodus, Yetziat Mitzrayim, and Ben Zoma said that we will not. And that is based on the Pasuk that says, Bayom Ahu Yinei B'Yinu Hashem, the day will come. This is in Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah 23. The day will come when people will not swear in the name of Hashem who brought Bnei Israel from Egypt, but rather in the name of Hashem who brought Israel from the north. The problem with this interpretation is that first Hachamim contradict the statement of Yirmiyahu. If Yirmiyahu said that by prophecy that when Mashiach comes, people will not remember the Exodus, how can the rabbi say L'Havayimot HaMashiach? and not only that, if that is the core of their dispute, then the Mishnah should have said, "Lo zachidi shete'amer yetziat Mitzrayim bimot HaMashiach." I didn't have the merit to hear someone saying that even after Mashiach comes, we still mention Yetziat Mitzrayim. So it must be understood as a midrash. There are different interpretations to explain this text, not literally. In my opinion, based on some ideas that commentators mentioned, one of them Avraham Korman, but in a twist on that is that they are discussing post-destruction, discussing the necessity to rise up against their oppressors. Yetziat Mitzrayim is a symbol of redemption. The question is, are you going to fight for redemption when you are in a dark night in a situation like that, post-destruction, or do you have to wait for a day? Do you have to wait for a divine sign that shows you that you're in a good place where you could fight against your oppressors? And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, until Ben Zoma came and pushed for that kind of that kind of activity against the Romans, no one ever said that. And it fits also in terms of the time, because it's between the Great Rebellion in the years 67 to 70 and the Bar Kokhba Rebellion in 132 to 135. Ben Zoma was one of the colleagues of Rabbi Akiva, could have been involved in the rebellion. And he says, you have to rebel against the Romans, even though we'll live in those dark times. Rabbi Elazar is 70 years old. It's a perfect time between someone who was born after the Great Revolt and now is alive at the time of Bered Bar Kokhba. The rabbis disagree and they say, Yemei Hayecha Olam Hazeh. You remember the Exodus in this world. The full redemption will come when Mashiach comes. Or in other words, they say, you need to have divine intervention before you go to war against the Romans. And with that, the first chapter concludes, and also this self-standing unit of Masechet Berakhot. We go now to chapter 2. היה קורא בתורה והגיע זמן המקרא, אם כיוון ליבו יצא, ואם לאו, לא יצא. One was reading the Torah, and it came time to recite Shema. If he directed his mind and intended to fulfill his obligation, he did fulfill his obligation. But if not, he did not fulfill his obligation. Now, the classical interpretation of this Mishnah is that one is reading the Torah and was reading the parashiot of Shema. And as he was reading it, the time of Kirat Shema has come. And if he has intention, he fulfilled his obligation. And if not, he did not fulfill his obligation. This is a very hard, even though this is the halachic interpretation, when we look at what we will call the pshat of the Mishnah, it is hard to fit it in. And it is hard to assume that the Mishnah will have to write a special halacha just for this case. How often does it happen that one reads the Torah early in the morning and he reads specifically the portions of Kirat Shema and at the time of Kirat Shema? This is highly unlikely. Not only that, if we speak about all the parashiot of Shema, Vayam Shamoa, and Parashat Tzitzit, one would not read them in the Torah one after the other. Between Parashat Shema and Parashat Vayam Shamoa, there are a couple of chapters that separate them, and both are in Devarim, while Vayomer is in Bamidbar. So we're talking about someone who's reading the Torah, and then the time of Kirat Shema has come. He's not praying, he's not saying the Amidah, but instead he's rolling the Sefer back and forth in order to get to the chapters of Kirat Shema. It wouldn't be easy for him to stop and just take a Siddur and pray. Why is he reading the Torah anyway? What is the point of that? Is it something that, it seems like it's something that he cannot stop doing? Does he have an obligation to read the Torah? How? So all these questions may lead to a different reading of the Mishnah, which is, one is studying Torah. He's just reading any part of the Torah. And now is the time of Shema. And the Hidush, the revelation of the Mishnah to us is that any reading of the Torah would cover for Kirat Shema. This is, I think, what the Mishnah might have meant initially, and that fits in with what the Gemara says about the obligation of Talmud Torah. The Gemara discusses the obligation of Talmud Torah, and it says one has to study Torah. Ve'agita bo yamam v'layla. You have to study Torah day and night. And then the Gemara says one can fulfill the obligation of studying Torah day and night by reading the Shema in the morning and the evening. But you're not allowed to teach that to the public, because everybody will decide to go for that and just read the Shema instead of studying Torah. But we see from that they understood the Kirat Shema as a way to fulfill the mitzvah of studying Torah. So it would make perfect sense that Haya Koreh Torah, one reads the Torah, he studies Torah, and because that was the main text that was available for people to read. There's no Mishnah yet. When this is written, the Mishnah is writing it, but other people don't have Mishnayot. So what do they study? They study Torah. How do they study Torah? By the method of Midrash Halacha. And there's another thing that we have already discussed before. The method of Midrash Halacha predated the Mishnah. Even though the names of the rabbis in the Mishnah and the Midrash are quite similar, or even sometimes the Midrash is later, the names of the sages are later than those of the Mishnah, it's just a question of editing. But the format, the methodology of studying Halacha already existed before the Mishnah. So one is studying the Torah, and probably with the interpretive modes, he explains to himself or to others word by word, and now is the time to read Shema. So if he has intention to have that reading cover for the mitzvah of Kirat Shema, he fulfilled his obligation. But Parakim, Sho'alim Pnei HaKavod U'Meshiv, Be'emtza here they speak about when one can stop in between. I'm not going to dwell on this Mishnah. The second Mishnah. So in Mishnah 2, the Mishnah explains where are the stop signs between the two chapters of Kirat Shema, between the blessings, Ben Shema, etc., Ben Vayomer Lamed Ve'atziv, and that is just the technical details of the Shema. I'm not going to dwell on this. Mishnah 3 speaks about the details of Shema. What happens if you read and you didn't hear? The first author of the rabbi in the Mishnah, the Tanakama, says you fulfilled your obligation. Rabbi says you did not. What happened if you read and you didn't read the letters carefully? One says you fulfilled it. One says you didn't fulfill it. If you read it backwards, not in the right order, you did not fulfill the obligation. When if one made a mistake, he has to go back to the place where he made a mistake. All these things are reflective of the fact that people did not have yet the Shema as a solid unit that they read on a daily basis. Some people would make mistakes, some people wouldn't know the right order, and the rabbis had to insist on doing it in the right way. Mishnah 4 speaks about the workers who are allowed to read the Shema on top of a tree or on top of wall stones, which they are not to do for the tefillah, because if they have to pray the Amidah, they cannot have the proper focus while they're standing on top of a tree or on top of a wall. But we learn from here that people used to go to work early in the morning, just that for the seat of in life. To understand the social context of the Mishnah, the people get up very early, they go to work, and they have to do the tefillah while there. So the normal setting that we have today, that people always go to the synagogue, people who make sure that they pray on a daily basis, all go to the synagogue and the Knesset and pray together early in the morning, that did not necessarily exist in the time of the Mishnah. Mishnah 5. Hatan patur mikriat Shema balayla rishon ad motzei Shabbat im lo asa ma'aseh. A groom is exempt from reading Shema from the first night of the wedding until motzei Shabbat, until first Saturday night, because he's still consumed by thoughts of what he has to do. but Rabban Gamliel read the Shema on the first night of his wedding. The students asked him, "You taught us that one is exempt." Amar lahem, "Eini shomea lachem levatel mimeni malchut shamayim afilu sha'ah achat." I will not listen to you. You try to make me not accept the burden of God's sovereignty. I will not listen to you even for to not do it even for a short while. So again, we see that Rabban Gamliel disagrees with the halakha established by the rabbis. We saw it in chapter 1 when the rabbi said that you could read the Shema, the deadline, you have to do it before midnight, and he said that you can continue. Here he reads the Shema even though a hatan, a groom, is exempt. And he's probably young, unless it's the second marriage. We don't know exactly how old was he when he got married. The interesting thing is when the disciples tell him, "You taught us differently," do they mean that this is the rule that Rabban Gamliel ruled, or this is what the rabbis ruled and Rabban Gamliel disagreed with him? We don't know. And the same thing happens to the next two halachot. In Mishnah 6, Mishnah Vav, we read that he took a bath he washed on the first night after his wife passed away, and he said, "I am an exception, even though mourners usually do not wash. I'm a delicate person and I need that." When his servant, a slave, Tavei, died, he had shiva for him. So he was not shiva. That's a different concept. But he was sitting and getting people coming to him and offering comfort. And again, the disciples asked, "Didn't you teach us that you don't do that for slaves?" He said he was a different type of person. He was kasher. All these things show us the contention between Rabban Gamliel and the rabbis. The last Mishnah of the chapter concludes, "Hatan im ratza likro kriyat shema halayla rishon koreh." Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, "Lo kol harotze litol et Hashem yitot." If a groom wants to recite Shema on the first night, he may recite it. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, not everyone who wants to take on the divine name may take it on. This is one understanding of the Mishnah, that Hashem means the divine name. But there's a different way to understand this. We'll go back to Mishnah 5. The Mishnah says clearly Hatan is exempt from reading the Shema, and tells us the story of Rabban Gamliel, who was an exception. Then the Mishnah segues to tell two other cases where Rabban Gamliel did not follow the ruling of Hachamim. And then the Mishnah goes back to the issue of the groom and says that what it said before about the Hatan being exempt, it means that he's exempt, not obligated, but if he wants to read the Shema, he has permission to do so. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, whose father was an exception, says not everyone who wants to take the crown, Hashem, who should be understood as the crown, the glory, could do that. Meaning, he says, this is something that my father could have done because he was a special person, but it's not for all people. That is interesting because it shows us that there is a certain air of maybe arrogance or the sense of being special that runs in this family. And when we get to the Gemara and we'll see the dispute between Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and other sages, we'll see that there was really some kind of a very, very strong leadership, almost dictatorship from the family of the descendants of Hillel, the Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Shimon's son, etc. Chapter 3 still speaks about the Shema, saying that one who's dead is not buried yet is exempt from reading Shema, from doing the Amidah, and for putting on Tefillin. Those who carry the coffin, and those who replace them, and those who replace the replacement, whether those who walk before the coffin or those who walk after the coffin, if they are needed to carry the coffin, they are exempt, and if not, they have to read the Shema and put on Tefillin. All of them are exempt from tefillah. Then Mishnah 2, and I'll go back to the first one in a second. After they buried the dead and they came back, if they could read and finish before the mourners reach the place in which they stand in line to give condolences to the Avelim, they could read, and if not, they should not read it. But those who stand in line waiting for the mourners to come, those who stand on the inside are exempt because they see the mourners, and those who stand behind them are obligated. So we learn a couple of things here. First of all, the funeral was a very long process, much longer than it is today. Today we think about it as something that takes a couple of hours. Back then it could have taken half a day, probably because of great distances that they had to travel by foot. And also this very strange situation where while the mourners are being comforted by the people who are standing in line, the other group behind them is reading the Shema or saying the Amidah. That's just, again, an example of not having established times for prayer, because the way it is done today, the funeral will be scheduled for after the morning services, before the evening services, etc. This was not a concern of the people at the time of the Mishnah. Now, this is now concluding the laws of Kriyat Shema. Speaking about those who are exempt, there is a certain order here. We could say that the third and second chapter are connected because the previous one spoke about the last Mishnah was about the death of Tavi, the slave of Rabbi Gamliel, or maybe it is connected because it spoke about the special case of the workers who are in the top of the tree or on top of the wall. But here we talk about other exemptions, those who accompany the casket. Now, women, slaves, and minors are exempt from Kriyat Shema and Tefillin. That is a full discussion that we will have to do when we do Gemara and we get to Masechet Kiddushin where this is discussed. But they are obligated to say the Tefillah, to have a mezuzah and say Berakhot Hamazon. Berakhot Hamazon, because the rabbis understood, is the Oraita, and it applies to anyone who ate and was satisfied by the meal. Mezuzah, because it is the obligation of anyone who lives in the house. And Tefillah, because there's no distinction between tefillah could be done at all times. In Mishnah 4, Ba'al keri me'aher belibo ve'no mevarech lo lefanea ve'lo lacharea, someone who is impure because of ejection of semen, just thinks of the blessing and doesn't say a blessing. Just read the Shema in his heart, in his mind, but not saying a blessing before or after. And that is because of the takana, the decree of Ezra, that one who is impure because of that should not read the divrei Torah. It's interesting. The Talmud says that this takana did not follow and was not followed at the time of the Gemara, but the Mishnah is still working with the assumption that this is a valid takana, that you cannot study or read Torah when you have this kind of impurity. Even if we have a situation when one is during the prayer and remembers that he is impure because of that. Here is another interesting halacha. Yarad litbol im yachol la'alot ulitkasot velikot ad shelo tanetz hama ya'ale v'yitkase v'yikra. If one is in the mikveh and then he realizes it's about time to read Shema, and here the Mishnah is insistent on reading the Shema before sunrise. Ad shelo tanetz hama. Then he should go out of the water and cover himself and read. V'im lav yitkaseh b'mayim v'yikra. And if not, he could just go into the water up until his neck and read. But not if this water is mayim ra'im or mea mishra, ad she'atid letocha mayim, as those are water, v'lo yitkaseh, lo b'mayim ra'im v'lo mea mishra, ad she'atid letocha mayim. He cannot cover himself with foul waters. What is kind of foul waters? The Mishnah doesn't mention. The Gemara says it's urine or mea mishra. This is water in which flax is soaked, and he must distance himself from them and from excrement 4 cubits. Now, here's an example of how the Gemara takes the Mishnah completely out of context and describes it, expresses it differently. The Mishnah clearly says that one covers himself with the water, but not with foul water or the water of soaking flax. But the Gemara says that that this is not water that you are taking tevilah in, but rather they're water that are near you, and you have to move away from them because of the smell. But this is not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah speaks about a situation where one is in the water. So again, we always have to compare the text of the Mishnah, at least within the context, to how the Gemara interprets it, regardless whether we do follow the halakha of the Gemara. But it's important to understand that in all these halachot, the Gemara sometimes took the liberty to explain the Mishnah in a certain way, and not always it has an impact on halakha. But when we deal with serious problems that need serious solutions, maybe it's worth it to look into that question of the interpretation of the Mishnah. It ends with a couple of other people who need to do tevilah in general, not just for Kriyat Shema. That is the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Chapter 4, we've discussed briefly in our discussion of the Mishnah. I'll go a little more in depth here. It speaks about the time to pray the tefillah, the tefillat shaharit, tefillat minha, tefillat arvit, tefillat musaf, the 4 tefillot. So up until now we spoke about the Shema. Chapter 1, 2, and 3 spoke about the Shema, about different rules, exemption, etc. Now we are talking about the Amidah. So the Shmoneh, what we call the Shmoneh Esrei. So Shaharit, you could pray until midday. It's a very sort of lenient or generous allowance to pray all the way till midday. Rabbi Yehuda says up to 4 hours, 4 temporal hours, calculated by dividing the time between sunrise and sunset into 12. Tfilat minha ad ha'erev. The minha one could pray up until the evening. And here, this is sort of flexibility. We don't know what the evening is. Is it sunset, a little before sunset, total dark? Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad plag haminha. Rabbi Yehuda says one can pray up until half the time of minha, which is 9.5 hours is the time of minha, plus 1 hour and a quarter. I'm not getting into that now. Tfilat ha'erev and lakeva, there's no set time for Tfilat ha'erev. You pray the arvit anytime during when it's dark, and musafin could be said all day long. But after the Mishnah opens with this clear statement that seems to suggest that there is an obligation to pray, we read this Mishnah. Rabbi Nahunya ben Akana היה מתפלל בכניסתו לבית המדרש וביציאתו תפילה קצרה. Rabbi Nahunya ben Akana would offer a brief prayer when he entered the study hall, and when he would leave the study hall, the Bet Midrash. And people ask, what is the meaning of that prayer? He said, when I come in, I pray to Hashem that nothing bad will happen because of me, meaning that I will make a mistake in my ruling. And when I leave the Bet Midrash, I thank God that the day went smoothly. Traditionally, people understood that as a sort of an insertion or extrapolation not related to the text before and after, just a comment. Oh, Rabbi Nahunya used to pray a special tefillah, but it has no place here. If this is really the meaning of the Mishnah, it doesn't belong here at all. There's no segue, there's no tangent, there's no reason to digress into this discussion. The logical Mishnah to succeed the first Mishnah would be Mishnah 3, where Rabban Gamliel Omer Bechol Yom Mitpalel Adam Shmoneh Esrei, where they speak about what is tefillah. Is it Shmoneh Esrei? Is it an abridged Shmoneh Esrei, which is according to Rabbi Yeshua, or Rabbi Akiva, who makes the compromise and says if you know it by heart, you pray the full 18, and if not, the abridged 18. So it's more probable to say that Rabbi Nahunya ben Akana, who intervenes here in the middle, sort of within the discussion of the tefillah, says you don't need to say tefillat hashahar. He disagrees with the whole concept of having set tefillot, but rather he would spend all of his day in the Bet HaMidrash as a dayan, as a judge, and would just pray for the things that he does in the Bet HaMidrash, that they will be successful. And when he is finished, he praises Hashem for those things being successful. So he disagrees with the whole concept of having the tefillah in that manner. Rabban Gamliel Omer. So, like I said before, in Mishnah 3, we mentioned the three rabbis who say either you say the full tefillah, partial tefillah, or a bridge tefillah, or like Rabbi Akiva says, a compromise. Depends on how familiar you are with the tefillah. Rabbi Eliezer Omer in Mishnah 4, ha'oseh tefilato keva and tefilato tahanunim. That phrase actually belongs to the previous Mishnah, because he says, he who makes his prayer a set prayer, it is not pleading. So traditionally that was translated as, he who feels that the tefillah is a burden for him, it will not be a supplication. But that doesn't belong in a halachic discussion. That is a moral teaching. If it really speaks about feeling that tefillah is burden, he should not have used the word keva, but the word mas'oi. Ha'oseh tefilato kemas'oi, or mishet tefilato doma alav kemas'oi. One who considers the tefillah to be a burden is not fulfilling his obligation. He's just making a statement. If you have a set prayer, it will not be a supplication. So here it's also safe to assume that he is along the lines of Rabbi Yehuda ben Hakana in Mishnah 2, and he says that he is against the whole idea of having a set tefillah. You want to pray, you want to say that one has to pray 3 times a day, fine, but don't impose on people the text of the tefillah, because it will not be tahanunim. And when we look really in perspective of 2,000 years, Rabbi Eliezer was probably right. Most people who pray on a daily basis do not feel the sense of supplication and excitement in the tefillah. The end of this Mishnah speaks about one who is in a dangerous place, and he says a short prayer. It seems like this prayer only replaces the middle 12 blessings of the Amidah, but it could have been that it replaces all of them. It says, Hoshai et amecha, Hashem et amecha, sherit Yisrael. Please Hashem redeem the remnant of your people, Am Yisrael. Bechol parashat ha'ibur, during the time of Ibur, which could be either transition or whatever has to do with the agrarian needs of the people, please heed their prayers. Blessed are you, Hashem Shemat Tefillah. So this could either could either replace the middle Berakhot or all of Hamidah. Mishnah 5 and 6 speak about people who are not in a place where they can pray, riding a donkey or sitting in a ship. You just have to think of either look towards the Bet HaMikdash or have the kavanah to think towards Bet HaMikdash. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, and finally we conclude chapter 4, and with that we'll conclude our discussion of today. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, en tefilat hamusafim ella behever ir, v'chachamim אומרים behever ir, v'shelo behever ir. Rabbi Elazar says, Tfilat HaMusafin is a special tefillah. It is only said where people gather to prayer. So some say that it refers to a minyan, but it seems that Rabbi Elazar doesn't say you have to have asara. It says hever ir. Hever ir are the leaders of the city, meaning it's an important city where people gather together. And maybe Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah speaks here about a certain way to compensate for the destruction of the temple. And he says this Musafin is a special prayer that is related to the temple, and it has to be done in a setting which resembles the temple. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmo, Kol Makom Sheyesh Hever Ir, Hayachid Patur Mitfilat HaMusafim. Rabbi Yehuda says an interesting halacha by the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, where you have a hever ir, an individual is exempt from praying a musaf. So if you say that this means minyan, it's really a very generous allowance to say that wherever there is a minyan, one does not have to pray musaf separately. But if it's the other interpretation, that Haver Ir means the leaders of the city, and it's an important city where the Bedin maybe gathers together, then it would make sense for rabbi-ovadia to say, this is similar to the Kohen representing the people in the Beit HaMikdash, just as the Kohen was the only one, or the several Kohanim working with him, bringing the sacrifice, so also the leaders of the community, maybe the rabbis, maybe the officials of the city, they are in charge of the musafim, and the individual is exempt. With this, we conclude today's session. We did the first 4 chapters of Berakhot. In the next session, we'll start in chapter 5.